Hey guys, how you doing? It's been a while. Hope you guys are all staying safe. You guys will notice that some of this information that I will be discussing today will relate to some of the information you guys learned earlier this week about how industrial revolution and the Great Divergence are related to imperialism. Does anybody want to answer what they think a motive for imperialism is? Wow. Well, the five motives of imperialism are economic, technological, political/military, religious, and ideologic. You guys will notice that all five of these motives are intertwined with each other. Could you guys give me some examples of how these motives can be connected with each other? Well, okay. Some of the examples that you will see is the economy and the military and the technology, and ideals either that are political or religious in nature. So now we're going to be moving on to talk about the fourth motive, and that's economy. Due to the Industrial Revolution, industries required large quantities of raw materials. And in order to sell these products, they had to expand and create new markets. All of this created an increase of competition within trading across the globe. Due to the competition of trading, governments and private companies wanted the highest profit margin at the lowest cost. They soon realized that these profits can be achieved through the need of raw materials. To obtain these raw materials, they would hire cheap labor and mine for these natural materials, such as gold, diamonds, silver, copper, tin. Because all these production companies in Europe needed these materials. And these countries and companies were in competition with each other. So they needed to sell it at the lowest cost possible while maintaining a high profit margin, which wasn't easy. Colonies not only provided cheap labor and the obtaining of raw materials, but also new markets to sell goods. They could sell goods in the colonies that were not made or produced in the colonies. So saying, you have an item made in Belgium. So they would have the item in Belgium sent to the Congo and sell those items in the Congo. Because you couldn't buy those items in Africa that you could buy in Europe. While a few Africans ended up buying these European goods, so it wasn't that successful. It'll be more successful, I believe, with trading in the imperialism Asia, because they would be more willing to trade. And yeah, now I'm going to be moving on to the political and the military goals. For the politics, the desire to gain power through the expansion of land, or also the idiotic belief that them as Europeans thought it was their right to conquer inferior people because they were doing these countries a favor. You'll learn more about this cause and belief later in this lesson. Now we're talking about the military. To develop weapons help the military gain power and land. Example is like the Maxim machine gun, which was the world's first machine gun and that was able to fire 550 bullets per minute. These European armies would be fighting against African tribes who were still primitive with their weapons, such as using spears, bows and arrows, or items with metal blades. As you've also learned about the ironclad ship, which was powerful enough to destroy the entire fleet of wooden vessels, but also strong enough that these wooden vessels would not damage it. Another thing about the military is having strategic military posts. These colonies or posts could be used to refill trading ships or military ships, and also have proximity to those natural resources that the country needed, and also to protect these resources. Also, these posts had purpose of defending and attacking against one's enemy. Example, Britain had military posts in Egypt, South Africa, and Gibraltar, all as ways of protecting the sea and of their seafaring interests. Egypt was a major colony due to the Suez Canal, which ships were able to travel from Europe and the Mediterranean Sea directly to the Persian Gulf that flows out to the Indian Ocean. So European ships would not need to travel around Africa to get to Asia or India. As you can tell, that would save them a lot of time, and which time means money, because the ships, they could travel to Asia so they could get materials and travel back. So trading would increase and the movement of materials would increase. Now we're going to move on to technology. Technology was probably the motive that was connected most with each other, with the other motives. As transportation, boats were able to travel at faster speeds due to the invention of the steam-powered engine. These steam-powered engine boats led traders and armies being able to travel into the African interior. Before that, they was just basically stay to the African coast. Once they were able to conquer the lands in the interior, they could build railroads. Railroads would allow them to transport heavier materials at more frequent intervals back to the coast, so that ships could travel them back to Europe. So you would have the steam-powered engines, have boats take them into the African interior. Once they were able to mine for these natural resources, they could put these resources back on a steam-powered train, and the train would be able to go at a faster pace back to the coast. Then they could load it up on the coast. Then the steam-powered ship would be able to travel back to Europe at a quicker time. So they're using the steam-powered ship and the steam-powered engine in multiple perspectives. As I talked about technology of weapons, I just mentioned the Maxim machine gun and the Ironclad warship during that last segment. But another weapon was the modern artillery. And it was able to come to fruition because of various achievements in technology. The modern artillery at this time was a breech-loading rifle gun that could be fired with much greater velocity and distance, and they were all movable with wheels. You might recall seeing these weapons being used in American Civil War or other military interventions of the 1800s. Also, there's medicine interventions, because inland Africa had many fatal diseases due to insects and a thick rainforest. Insects like mosquitoes had a very deadly disease called malaria, which affected very many Europeans. So technology advancements had to take place, such as the drug quinine was created and used as a vaccine against malaria. Now we're going to move on to the religious motives. European Christians felt superior to other religions, and by doing so, the church sent missionaries out to the world because they felt it was their obligation and duty to spread the word and teachings of the Christian God to Africa and to Asia, and to help convert these so-called non-believers. They did so by establishing churches in these countries, which helped promote the spread of Christian and also Western values to these people. As you will notice, the religious motives and the ideological motives are very similar, because Europeans at this time believed that they believed of cultural superiority and believed that these other cultures and races must accustom to and integrate into a European way of life. So basically, they wanted to have the spread of Christian / European values to these people. A lot of you might have heard about Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution, and maybe even his side of the survival of the fittest. And that line, the survival of the fittest, comes into question now as it relates to imperialism. The term social Darwinism relates to how Europeans believed that them as the white race was dominant, and it was only natural for them to conquer the inferior people as a way of nature's way of improving mankind. Thus, the conquest of inferior people was just, and the destruction of weaker races was nature's natural law. As you guys all know, this is some hoo-ha, because every man is born equal. It doesn't matter. All people are created equal. Now we're going to be moving on to the white man's burden. As you guys learned on Monday, that the sense of cultural superiority is referred to as the white man's burden. I'm going to give you some information on why. The poem of White Man's Burden was written by a British author, Rudyard Kipling. And to give you some background about Kipling, he was born in British-controlled India, and throughout growing up, he experienced many deaths between British and Indians. While he was in favor of imperialism, because he believed that the British had the right and the responsibility to civilize these Indian people. The meaning of the poem was to urge Teddy Roosevelt, who initially was anti-imperialist but changed mind to stay in power. We don't need to get more in depth about that. So he wanted to urge Teddy Roosevelt and the United States to take up the burden of the empire, as other European nations and Britain did, and to colonize the Philippine Islands and its people for the Western way of life. You guys will learn more about the significance and more in depth about the white man's burden on Monday, but also to leave today. What motive do you think was the most critical to imperialism and why? Guys, thank you, and hope you guys are all staying safe at home.